Hey, how's it going, guys? Jason with LumaBlade here. Today I wanted to take you through a brief tutorial on a hidden Tang knife. I've never done a hidden Tang knife before. I did a lot of the research and I figured, hey, might as well do a video on it to show you guys at least what the process is um, along the way, and I'll go over my mistakes. It's not going to be a step-by-step tutorial. I'm just basically going to explain the construction of it and how I'm going about doing it. And this will be a couple of maybe a couple of videos to do this. So I'm going to bring you over and show you where I'm at. Go over only the specialty stuff that we did. I'm going to use that 1084 blade that I normalized and heat treated in my heat treat videos. And yeah, so I'll direct you over there and we'll go over it. So I'm gonna turn you around right now. Alright, guys, I'm gonna go over the basics of what you need. Of course, shameless plug for the LB1. I love this thing. Well, let me assemble what I got here first. Okay, I got my guard. Okay, it's fairly easy, and then I got my handle piece. Okay. Alright. So this is where I'm at right now. Okay? And I'll go over with you as to how I got here, why I did this, whatever. Okay? So, first thing I have is the blade shape. I just basically looked at pictures and kind of drew something, came up with this blade shape for a traditional hunting blade type, blade. That's what I came up with. You can see in the blade itself, I cut these. Let's see if you can see it. These jagged serrations in it. That's to create kind of a keyway for the epoxy to grab on when it's inside the hole. The little hole on top, I can drill a piece of all thread through it and use that and tighten the nut down over the top to push the I'm going to call this the guard tight against here while the JB weld or epoxy dries. Well, there's many ways to do this, and there's guys that know this well better than I do, but this is how I'm doing it. Okay, so for materials, this is what I chose. You don't need a lot of materials to do this, to dress it up nice. I got a piece of nickel silver right here for my first part of my guard, and then I have a piece of copper. Let's see if I get this in here. Got a piece of copper, a piece of OD green G10 because I know the copper is going to patina, and in the center I have a piece of Alaskan yellow cedar burl. Then I have another piece of G10 and a top by another piece of copper, which I think is going to be a nice contrast. Right here I have my guard slot, which can be accomplished one of two ways. Me, I have a milling machine, so I just plunged my mill through it and milled the slot and then filed it to fit, so that's a decent tight fit. The other way that you can do it is you can drill it by drilling 2 holes and just some file work, which I would do no problem. Another thing that's important is this point. I'll show you. Your shoulder cuts have to be at 90 degrees in here. So let's see if your shoulder cuts right in here have to be at 90 degrees, and they have to be parallel and flat to one another. One way to do this is to use and buy a actual jig that's made for this. My friend had one who's really into this style of knife, and he actually let me use it. So what I do is I got the 3 pieces. You don't need big pieces. Like, this is half of the piece of nickel silver that I used, and then I had some pieces of copper. So you get the pieces, lay everything out, lay the basic shape that you want. You want to lay that all out on here. Lay out the location of the guard. you know, do the best you can, guys, you know. And then what I do is I use what's called die chem. It's this fluid stuff here. It's basically a marking dye for metal. Paint it on there, let it dry. It dries like in 5 seconds. And I use a scribe. This is what I use. You can use anything, use a nail, whatever. I use an actual scribe. I scribe out the shape, scribe out my locations. While it's square, I put it in the mill, in the vise, and I cut my slots. Then I go over to my bandsaw. I rough it out very close because you have to keep in mind that copper is a huge conductor, and it gets very hot very easy. And apparently so does nickel silver. So I cut out the 3 pieces, and I cut them, I rough them out. Then I take epoxy, do each layer, glue them all together, put them in clamps. Spring clamps is what I use. Let it sit overnight. Then I didn't have the nickel silver at the time. I was waiting on it for one of my friends to have it. But I'll also be epoxying the nickel silver to this. So then you use the tang of your knife, and you put, so that's one way that I put it in, there it is. You put this on your tang, you go up to your belt sander and just start shaping it out, shape it out, shape it out. And I wound up with a little kind of a different oval shade. I don't know if you can see that focus. There we go. One thing that I did do was I made sure that the top for aesthetics was only about an 1/8 inch above the spine of the knife, so it's only about a strong 1/8 inch above to the top. When I talk about the shoulder cuts, this isn't pushed down all the way, but I don't know if you can see where it meets. Now what I did with the bottom, the underside of this copper, is I used my surface plate with sandpaper, wet sand, and I lapped it to make sure that this was a perfectly flat surface to mate against this 90-degree shoulders. So let's see, what's the next stage? The next step was the handle. I had to figure out what handle to do and how to get the handle. You know, this basically slips in right there, and that's what holds this knife in place. Is this tang here. So okay, I get that out. So how do you get that hole in? How do you get this slotted hole in there that's tight? How does that happen? Well, I'll tell you how it happens. First thing I do is I face this. So I put basically a smooth 90-degree cut on the block of wood. Don't make the mistake of rough cutting the wood to what you think it's going to be. Just take your block of wood, your chunk of wood, antler, you could do it, but I haven't done antler with, or anything else, and I'm using wood. Then what I do is I take, now I'm a woodworker, so this is what I do. I cut it on my chop saw. Cut this, face this, so it's a nice smooth 90-degree cut. Then I put a straight edge from this point to this point, and I draw a line. From this point to this point, and I draw a line. That gives me an X, which gives me the center location. So on either side of the X, depending on the size of your tang, for this I used a 3/16 drill bit. So I drilled a 3/16 inch hole and a 3/16 inch hole, and the center I had there was still a line of wood there. That line of wood was maybe a 1/16 of an inch thick, but this is cocobolo and it's a hard dense wood, so 16 inch is a 16 inch. And then what I do is I used what's called a broach. Now this is a homemade broach that my friend who actually makes these type of knives made himself out of a old 1/4 inch chisel. Okay, he did a really good job at it, I think. Here's one that I made real quickly to use. It's a little different, but it grabs. I made my hook a little bit bigger than his, so I could get in there a lot easier. So basically, what you do is you put this block in the vise, and you take the broach, you go in on an angle, you go up, you grab it, first you grab that piece, break it off, pull it out. You work your way in, break it off, pull it out. Work your way in, break it off, pull it out, all the way till you get all the way a little bit deeper. See if I do a little pull it out here. You hear that? You see that coming out? You just scrape it out. It takes a little bit of time, takes a little bit of effort, but it gets it the right, you know, width, and it does it little by little. Then I take a file and I clean up these sides with the file. You know, there's gonna be some file time. You sit up, you do a little fit, see how this fits in, and it was very snug. So what I chose to do is I chose to taper. Let's see what you do. Taper this just ever so slightly, so I can get the tip in nice, and so when it goes in, I'll get a good push lock up. I don't want to push it all the way in because I might not be able to get it out so easy. So there you have it, guys. This is the beginning stages of my I guess I'm just going to call it a traditional hunting knife. Every time I do something on it, I'll update how I did it and how I get further this part. So remember, right now all I have is a heat-treated blade, cut out, profiled. Well, I should have videotaped the Rockwell test. Well, that's not exciting. This came out right now before temper at a 64 Rockwell. So I'll probably be able to temper it down to a 59 or a 60, which I'm happy with. Next time, what we're going to do before I'm going to do the grind, get the grind in, get this all cleaned up, get everything all cleaned up, and once that is done, then I can actually glue this on, then glue this on, draw out the blade, draw out the handle shape, and start working on that. One tip I do have is don't bother heat treating your blade until you have this all fitted and done, because if you have to do any file work or anything on your blade to make anything work, it's going to make things a lot harder. So yep, like I said, this is not going to be a actual tutorial, but more rather how I build it. So if somebody else is thinking of possibly building one, and they don't have an idea of where to begin, kind of how they can begin. And another thing, you know, I like to take my time with stuff and look at things. These two here, these two copper rings are the same size. These two are the same size. This one's just one, so it doesn't matter. And this one is whatever size it is. I have nothing to compare it to. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to mill this side down just a little bit more to bring this, to make it a lighter accent. It's thinner than this, but it's not half the thickness of this. I think that the first one should be half the thickness of the second one, and so on and so forth. But that's just a little design detail. On this particular knife, I did not put a sharpening choil. I put a sharpening choil on everything I make now. I learned my lesson. The reason I did not put a sharpening choil on this particular one is because at all the exemplars I looked at and the examples, I didn't see one that had one. So I figured I'm just going to keep it as traditional as possible. You know, like I said, I'm going for perfection here, but hey, I can't make it. It's not going to be perfect, but I'm going to enjoy doing it. I'm going to have a lot of fun. So I'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching.